Good morning, and thank you for joining me. I'm Carol Stringer. I'm the Fulton County Agricultural and Natural Resources Agent, and today I'm going to talk about pumpkins. Pumpkins are part of the cucurbit family, which also includes other squash, cucumbers, and melons. They have a leathery skin that protects their orange flesh and interior seeds. They can range and come in a variety of colors from the typical orange to green to gray, white, yellow, even red, and they can range in size from just a few pounds to well over 1,000. Pumpkins, as we know them today, were originally domesticated in what is today Mexico. It was cultivated throughout the Americas, and squashes in general were just part of the three sisters agriculture of corn, beans, and squash. Some archaeologists today think that squashes are some of the oldest domesticated crops worldwide. There's some sites that suggest that squashes and gourds were cultivated as early as 10,000 years ago. Even though the exact date, we don't know it, we know for sure that pumpkins and other squashes were widely cultivated throughout the United States and throughout Mesoamerica well before the Europeans arrived here. Pumpkins are warm season annuals, which means that they have complete their entire life cycle in a single year. So in Georgia, pumpkins are planted in May for an October harvest, and in South Georgia, they can be planted as late as July and still get those pumpkins in on time. So being a warm season crop, they need at least 80 to 130 days of 70 plus degree weather in order to produce those nice fruits. But pumpkins unfortunately take up a lot of space, so they're not great for a home garden unless you just have a big one. They can take up upwards of 8 square feet or more per plant. They just have a lot of sprawling vines that cover the ground. So all cucurbits are monoecious. They produce both male and female flowers on the same plant, which means that pumpkins are dependent on pollinators in order to get that pollen from the male to the female plant and produce a fruit. So in commercial pumpkin production, we often see producers bring in beehives at the time of pollination in order to ensure that that happens effectively. Because they are a part of a larger plant family with many plant cousins, if you want to think of it that way, pumpkins will readily cross-pollinate with other squashes in your garden, such as zucchini or even yellow squash or butternuts, which can make seed saving a little bit problematic. And another factor that's a problem here in Georgia is that we just have a lot of disease and insect pressure on our melons and squashes. So it is important to rotate where you're planting those crops every year. So pumpkins here in the United States are grown either for cooking or for carving. So pumpkins that are grown specifically for decoration can be eaten, but they typically have poorer flavor than compared to a pumpkin that's grown for pie or for baking. Those smaller pumpkins typically have a higher sugar content and superior flesh quality. So Illinois is the biggest producer here in the United States of pumpkins, and those pumpkins are primarily going to the canned food and pie production market for consumers. So pumpkins grown in other states are typically going to the decorative market. And a fun fact is that at those pumpkin patches that are so popular now is that unless you see those pumpkins attached to a dried up vine when you're out there looking at them, it's possible they were brought in from either a different part of the farm and then aesthetically laid out in an aesthetically pleasing manner, or they might have been brought in from even another farm nearby. So commercially grown pumpkins destined for the food market are typically harvested mechanically. So they'll be pushed into rows, and then the next pass of the tractor will come by and lift them up into a truck, which will take them over to a processing plant, which is where they will be canned and sent out to the store. So damage and bruising is less important, as you guys can see in this lovely picture on the bottom, that we have pumpkins being shot over into the truck. So if those bust or bruise in any way, it's not as big of a deal. So decorative pumpkins, we still want them to be attractive and not have any bruising or damage. So those are harvested by hand. And there's a lovely picture of me on top of a giant pile of pumpkins that I harvested back in 2015. So worldwide, pumpkins are grown on every continent except Antarctica. Here in the United States, they are typically a seasonal crop, mostly grown for decoration, although some are grown for eating as well. But in other countries, they're primarily a food crop or an animal feed crop. So pumpkin carving is supposedly a tradition that came over with Irish and Scottish immigrants who had been traditionally carving turnips for their jack-o'-lanterns. And when they got here, the pumpkin being just much larger, much easier to carve, they were quickly adopted as the de facto jack-o'-lantern material. So they've been carved in the U.S. since at least the early 1800s. They've featured in our pop culture, even in the short story Legend of Sleepy Hollow, which was from that time period. And they're not just a Halloween tradition. Pumpkins are also a part of the Dia de los Muertos holiday in Mexico, and they're also a feature in many Mexican dishes as well. So if you want some more information about pumpkins or questions on other crops, feel free to contact your local extension office for more information.